Today we're going to begin lesson number 31, which is learning about how to do consecutive integer word problems. So if I take a look at our do now, I want you to answer a question. What does it mean for numbers to be consecutive? So take a second, pause the video, and answer that question. So consecutive means that one comes after the other, so kind of like in a row almost. So if we're talking about integers that are consecutive, so if our first integer is 1, then you have the next integer would be, I'm going to write this on the side. What comes right after 1 is 2, then 3, then 4, 5, 6, and so on. So if I'm not telling you what an integer is, though, I'm not going to tell you it's 1. We're going to tell you it's x. What would I need to do to x in order to get the next integer? So what do I do to 1 in order to get 2? And to 2 in order to get 3? And to 3 in order to get 4? And so on. So in order to go from 1 to 2, I add 1. To go from 2 to 3, I add 1. 3 plus 1 gives me 4. 4 plus 1 gives me 5. 5 plus 1 gives me 6, and so on. So in order to get the second integer, I need to take the first integer, which is x, and add 1 to it. Well, how would I get the third integer? In order to go from 1 to 2, I add 1. To go from 2 to 3, I add 1 more. So I take the first integer and I add 1, and then I add 1 again. So the third integer would really be x plus 2. What about consecutive even integers? So remember, even are those numbers that you could divide by 2, such as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. So if I'm not telling you what the first integer is, we'll say that it's x. But how do I get to the second one? Well, how do I get from 2 to 4? And then from 4 to 6, and then from 6 to 8, and from 8 to 10. To go from 2 to 4, I'm going to add 2. To go from 4 to 6, I'm going to add 2. From 6 to 8, I'm going to add 2. From 8 to 10, I'm going to add 2. So to get the second integer, I need to take the previous one, which is x, and add 2. So then how would I get the third integer in that sequence? In order to get to the third one, I start with the first one, I add 2. And then I add 2 again. So the third integer would really be x plus 4 there. So odd integers are 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. If I'm not telling you what the first integer is, I know it's x. How do I get from 1 to 3 to get my second integer? Well, I need to add 2. So it'd be x plus 2 to get to the second one. And from this one to this one, I need to add 2. Then how do I get from to the third integer? Well, from the first to the second, I add 2. Then to get to the third, I add 2 again. So I take the first integer, I add 2, and then I add 2 again. So that would give me x plus 4. So we're going to use our consecutive integer let statements to help us solve and create equations to find missing values. So take a look at question 1. It says the product of two consecutive integers is 272. Find the value of each of these integers. So first, it's saying product. Product means we are multiplying. So then it says two consecutive integers. So I don't know what these integers are. So we're going to let the first integer be x. And the second integer, well, if it's consecutive, it means one after the other. So the one after x would be x plus 1, as we talked about in our do now. So it says product of these. So I'm going to multiply them. And it says the product is 272. So that means that that must equal 272. So now we just need to solve this. So first I have x times x gives me x squared plus x times 1, which gives me x, equals 272. Now I have an x squared and an x, so I can't just solve. I need to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 272 on both sides. So then I end up with 0 equals x squared plus x minus 272. So now I notice that this is a trinomial, so I need to factor this trinomial. So I need to find out what multiplies to give me negative 272 and what adds to give me a positive 1. So I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses. And then I'm going to split up my x there. And then I get negative 16 and a positive 17. 17 times negative 16 gives me 272. And 17 plus a negative 16 equals 1. So then I have both of those equal 0. So I'm going to set each part equal to 0. X plus 17 equals 0. And x minus 16 equals 0. And I'm going to solve. So I get x equals negative 17 and x equals 16. Now, we're not necessarily done yet, though, because we're talking about consecutive integers. So consecutive means one after the other. So if x equals negative 17 here, and that's my first integer, what would my second integer, x plus 1, equal? Well, if I know x is negative 17, I can substitute it in there. So negative 17 plus 1 is negative 16. So here my first pair of integers are negative 17 and negative 16. Then we need to look at our next answer. So here we got 16. So I have x is 16. What about x plus 1 here? Well, 16 plus 1 is 17. So my next set of integers then is 16 and 17. So now let's look at example 2. The product of two consecutive even integers is 528. Well, here they're talking about products again, which means we are multiplying. But now it's two consecutive even integers. So we know that even integers are numbers such as 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. So we're going to let the first equals x because we don't know what it is. But now, since we're talking about even integers, the second integer would be x plus 2 in this case. So we said products, we're going to multiply x times x plus 2 equals, it says it is 528. So now we're going to solve. First we distribute, and we get x squared plus 2x equals 528. So now I have an x squared and an x, so I need to set it equal to 0. So I subtract 528 on both sides, and I get x squared plus 2x minus 528 equals 0. So now I notice that this is a trinomial. So I need to find what multiplies to give me negative 528 and what adds to give me a positive 2. So I set up my parentheses, and then we have the x, and we need to figure out what our factors are. So take a second and pause this video and try to solve for our factors. We solve, we get a positive 24 and a negative 22. Then we need to take each of these parentheses and set them equal to 0. So I have x plus 24 equals 0, and x minus 22 equals 0. Subtract 24 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 24. Add 22 on both sides, I get x equals 22. So now we're not finished. We need to find the value of each of these consecutive integers. So I need to use my let statements. I have x and x plus 2. If I know x equals negative 24, x plus 2 is negative 24 plus 2, or just negative 22. Then here I have x equals 22. So then x plus 2 would be 22 plus 2, which is just 24. So the two sets of integers would be negative 24 and negative 22, or 22 and 24. So now looking at number 3, we're going to find two consecutive negative integers whose product is 156. So we're going to actually ignore that negative part until we get to the end and we see what our answers are, because that doesn't affect our let statements. So just two consecutive integer. I don't know what the first one is, so we're going to call it x. And if they're just consecutive, the second one would be x plus 1. So then product tells us we're multiplying x times x plus 1, and the answer is 156. So now I'd like you to solve to get your answers for this and come back to check your answers. So if we take a look here, we distributed and we got x squared plus 1x equals 156. Then we have to set it equal to 0 and factor our trinomial to find what multiplied to give us negative 156 and what added to give us 1, and we got x plus 13 and x minus 12. So then we need to set each equal to 0 and solve, and we end up with x equals negative 13 and x equals 12. Now if we go back to the question, they wanted a negative integer. So here, this is x equals negative 13, and this one's a positive answer. So that answer is actually going to be rejected because it's not relevant to what the question is asking. So then when we look at our integers, we have x and x plus 1. We're only going to use negative 13, so I have negative 13 and negative 13 plus 1, which is negative 12. So the two integers here would be negative 13 and negative 12. The sum of the squares of two consecutive odd positive integers is 202. So first thing I notice is it says sum, which tells me I'm going to be doing some addition. Squares means I'm going to be raising something to the second power. So then I want two consecutive odd positive integers. Now remember, we're going to deal with the positive at the end just like we did with the negative. So two consecutive odd integers. So we don't know what the first integer is, so we're going to let the first one be x. And then the next one, if we're talking odd integers, the next integer is going to be x plus 2. So now it's saying the sum, so we're going to add these, x plus 2, of the squares of each of these. So the sum of the squares. So I'm going to square the x, and then I need to take the x plus 2 and square that as well. It says that sum is 202, so that must equal 202. So now we need to solve, but there's something special here when we're solving. So x squared just stays as x squared plus x plus 2 squared. Well, squaring tells me I'm multiplying something by itself. So that means I'm really doing x plus 2 times x plus 2 equals 202. So then here I'm going to have my x squared and I need to double distribute. So x times x gives me x squared. X times 2 gives me 2x. 2 times x gives me 2x. And 2 times 2 gives me 4. Equals 202. Now I'm going to combine my like terms. And I notice here when I combine, I have x squared and x squared that combine. And I also have a 2x and a 2x that combine. So then here I get 2x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 202. Now, I have an x squared and an x, so I need to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 202 on both sides. So then here I have 0 equals 2x squared plus 4x, and then 4 minus 202, because those can combine there, give me a negative 198. So now we need to factor. But the first method of factoring that I see here is not a trinomial because that a value isn't 1. I see that I have a GCF there. So I'm going to factor out my GCF of 2. And I'm left with x squared plus 2x minus 99 equals 0. Now this is a trinomial that I can factor. So I'm going to bring down my GCF of 2. And then I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses. So I need to find what multiplies to give me negative 99 and what adds to give me a positive 2. So that would be x plus 11 and x minus 9. Then I'm going to set each of these equal to 0. So x plus 11 equals 0, x minus 9 equals 0, and solve. So I get x equals negative 11. And I get x equals a positive 9. So now we need to go back to the question. And the question was asking to find the odd positive integers. So in this case then, the negative 11 is going to be rejected. And we're not going to use that answer. We're only going to use the 9. So if I have x is 9, x plus 2 would then be 9 plus 2, which is 11. So my integers would be 9 and 11. If you have any questions, please comment them on this video or on the Google Classroom. and complete practice worksheet number 31.